Welcome back to another edition of The Hard Sell. I'm your host, Joel Stevenson, and this week we've got a great guest. Margaret Lawrence actually started her career in finance and eventually made her way into Google, running strategy and operations for the small and medium business organization. And for the last number of years has been running Wayfair's B2B group, a job which she actually took over from me. And by all accounts, is such a much better job than I have, as she's now grown it to be a $1 billion plus division of Wayfair, which is a public company. It's an incredible accomplishment. So Margaret, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to see you.
Yeah, same. So, obviously, I've got a little bit of inside baseball on some of the things that you've been working on over the years. And, for folks that maybe don't know as much about the sort of the B2B part of Wayfair, maybe just give us a brief orientation of like, what is the sort of B2B Wayfair professional and Perigold? How does that sort of fit in within the greater Wayfair umbrella?
Sure. So Wayfair Professional is, as you said, the B2B division. We're basically leveraging all of the infrastructure, supplier relationships, tech, platforms, marketing machine to serve like business customers, which, as you know, are highly valuable customers, particularly relative to consumers. And we have a gated site, so we validate that a customer's a business and they log in. We serve 7 verticals: interior design, contractor, office, property management, accommodations, food service, and education are the 7. And this was more in your time, but the business itself sort of came because I think somebody before my time realized that businesses were shopping the site and coming back and spending more. And those businesses tended to be interior designers, which is our largest customer base. And, for all the reasons that consumers were coming, businesses who are shopping more frequently for things, we've got a ton of selection across a lot of categories. We have an account management sales team. We have services teams. So like we think about the value prop being like the selection, the services that we offer, including consolidated delivery, solid pricing, and speed, which you're highly familiar with. We're, as a broader company, very focused on making sure we get products to customers as quickly as possible in great shape.
Yeah.
And then Perigold is our luxury business, which I also oversee. Kind of same idea, leveraging the Wayfair machine, but we are taking places like the design, like the suppliers and brands that you would find at a design center, and bringing them to the consumer. So it's our luxury platform.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for that explanation. Maybe talk a little bit about the numbers here are quite large, and Wayfair, of course, as a business did very well over the last few years as part of some of the shifts in behavior that we saw as part of COVID. And so I'm curious now, as you look back on the B2B part of that journey, from the time that you've been there, what do you feel like has worked well as the organization has scaled? Like, what do you see as some of the themes as things that have allowed you to continue to build the business the way you have?
I think one nice fit is that Wayfair as a company is very data driven. So the B2B business has embraced that, and we think about how we scale relative to how many customers we have, how we can acquire new customers, and from what channels. So one of the places that we still find customers is on the consumer site. So if somebody's shopping and buys 50 conference room tables, we have an algorithm that'll flag our team, and we'll reach out and ask if they're shopping for business and enroll them. So we're as a company, like, very ROI is really top of mind. So we try to think about how do we take what we have and make smart investments. On the sales side, and I know this is a sales focused podcast, but it's no different. We think about, we sort of have aligned our customer journey to what our sales team looks like. So making sure that we can have a really cohesive introduction to the program and then get customers to the right service level, which may or may not mean giving them a salesperson.
And the salespeople are effectively all inside salespeople, is that?
Yeah, I mean, we have an enterprise team, but even they are probably relative to 10 years ago, you'd call them inside sales.
Yeah.
They will travel from periodically and they're pretty hands-on, but it's not feet on the street.
Yeah, makes sense. And I'm curious with COVID, so many things changed. And I think this is probably like a really interesting leadership time I'm imagining for you. And so I want to ask you a little bit about it, which was you had like simultaneously demand going up and supply chains breaking. So you had more people that wanted sort of fewer things that were available. And you have this sort of, part of what you mentioned your value prop is earlier is like speed and being able to get people, items quickly. So how did you navigate all of those competing demands?
It was a crazy time. It remains a crazy time for different reasons. I actually feel like a platform like Wayfair allows us to, like, when you couldn't get stuff out of China, we're so diverse in our supplier base that we have production through suppliers across the world. So like we have US based suppliers that fared very well during that time, Mexico. So there's like that kind of worked, and you found salespeople are super scrappy and they figured out where stuff, like when there were orders to be had, they figured out where stuff was available and, managed to bridge the gap. For sure, there were issues that came up across the board in different pockets just because of the supply chain issues were so widespread that it was hard to have like stability anywhere in any sort of predictable way. But on the whole, like we did quite well across all the verticals. We did pretty well during that time.
And did you find?
And then I'd say like it's still kind of a crazy time because you have suppliers that were expecting demand to continue at the same level, or even maybe not the same level, but higher than what we're seeing now. And so for folks that have lots of inventory, we feel like we're a great place to come and sell online.
Yeah, right. And did you see during that time that maybe customers that might have been harder to acquire, like did they end up sort of showing up in your funnel because they were like their normal sources of supply maybe were also out, and so they were open to considering new sources, or was it more just like taking care of the existing set of people that now wanted to leverage you maybe even and more so because they were busier?
Both, but to be honest, like that's actually been our sweet spot. Like we have a ton of good sized, for example, hotels who had stuff ready. This is pre-COVID, who had, stuff ordered ready to come that fell through. And like, so then they were in a time crunch, and what we're actually very good at is speed. And so you've got like the tourist season's about to start. You're like, all of your case goods are no longer arriving, and you're like in a panic, and you look at Wayfair, figure out that there's a B2B program called Wayfair Professional, and we end up winning customers for a long time in those types of situations. So I felt like we were quite prepared for that dynamic, which definitely we got more of during that time.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's, sort of this idea that, times of disruption are oftentimes the best times to build businesses. And it seems like you were able to take, good advantage of that, in a market that I think like most of those verticals that you rattled off earlier, I would generally think of like relatively conservative, not that tech forward types of industry verticals. And so to be able to get them into a, more tech forward supply chain like Wayfair it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that period of time, many people went online that hadn't been before. And so that was like, we continue to benefit from that dynamic. The other thing that we were able to do, and we pushed like with our sales organization quite a bit, was helping partner with businesses. Like, you think about restaurants during that period, it was brutal to be running a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And so helping them think about how can you move your experience outside where people feel safe. So we did a lot of work with restaurants and getting them furniture so that their customers could have like comfortable, safe seating outside. And then like another industry that we leaned into was office. So as offices were coming back in from work from home, how can we rethink the way that you bring people together again in a safe way? And we did like everything from the safety piece of it, hand sanitizer stations and those, like screens, to like now where I think people are much less worried about the safety and more about how do people work differently today. So we're trying to be thought partners as well as sales teams with customers, like really listening and thinking about the problems that each of these customer types is dealing with.
In a lot of that, I suppose, specialization, if you will, like like when trends like that are sort of emerging, is that you're hearing that first from the sort of the salespeople and they're bubbling that up, and then you guys are sort of responding to that, or it's sort of a industry, somebody gets sort of an idea that like, hey, this is a trend, and like, let's try to sort of push it through the sales team, or which way does that tend to
I
operate?
find honestly that like the sales people who have customer relationships often are the ones coming to us with like, hey, I did this was really successful. And we did a bunch of case studies on that. But then you also see, you see articles about the same topics. But I would say like we first start to hear about it with the like customer facing teams.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's it's sort of a great advantage of a business like yours, where you are like pretty well set up from an information technology, like just an overall technology perspective, to be able to hear some of that and then act on it quickly.
Yeah,
It's probably a big advantage.
yeah, and we're the entire time we want our salespeople to be calling customers. And it was an awkward period where you're like, these customers might not be doing very well. So how can you have like an empathetic conversation as a partner to them? And so I think building that dynamic within the sales organization, whether it's like solution selling or whatever you would call it, but really not just pitching all the time, but really listening and understanding is very helpful for a broader business, as long as you're like pulling that information back to the broader team, making sure we have what customers need, and that we can like scream about it as well from a marketing perspective. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, and you had mentioned earlier that during this period and in general, you're able to sort of take advantage of maybe a one-time opportunity and turn that into a long-term relationship with a customer, right? And so I imagine as your account managers are really trying to build these relationships, like actually a lot of those like empathy and understanding is pretty important, because it's not like you're doing like a one-time, 7-figure SaaS deal or something. This is
right.
This is sort of, could stretch out over many, many years potentially.
Totally. And we have a ton of customers in the Fortune 100, 500. We have like tiny one-person shops too, so we have the long tail, we have huge customers. And so like depends on purchasing cycles, but generally people are buying on some regular cadence for the categories that we're selling.
Yeah, which is sort of a nice complement to the overall Wayfair business, which I think of as generally much more episodic in nature. Because like you move into a new house, you spend a bunch of money sort of fixing things up, and you might not do it again for a little while. So it's a neat niche. I'm curious a little bit about your sales teams and how they've sort of been structured. I mean, one of the things that we've talked a lot about on the podcast is sort of the changes that happened during COVID and then post-COVID, particularly to just like the orientation of like where people sit. And there's currently a lot of conversation about are people coming back to the office, and how's that going to work? And I'm curious what I believe your setup before was you had sort of pockets of, bigger sales force in a few different pockets. And it's like, how has that changed and evolved, and how are you maybe thinking about it moving forward?
So we were like an in-office team pre-COVID, and as most companies, we were like overnight, almost like everybody was working from home. I think what's kind of insane about that time is that we actually saw productivity go up, and like sales, you can track, are people on the phone? Are they outbound calling? So we felt very good about the ability to know whether productivity was in a good place. And then, with like many companies, it's been a long road to coming back. We decided for the sales organization, after a bunch of conversations with folks and sort of surveys, and that it made sense to maintain the work from home for our salespeople. So and the thought was, A, productivity had gone up, and B, to get in the car and drive an hour each way, pay for gas, pay for parking, to get on the phone and not talk to about anybody in the office, really. But it felt like a big, it felt tone deaf a little bit, at least when we made that decision. We do have sites that we invite people to come in and use if they're local and they're interested, but it's been very, very well received, honestly. And we continue to think now about how do you make there is a lot of apprenticeship that kind of happens naturally when you hear people talking behind you. So we put a lot of thought into how do we make sure that there's opportunities for, team discussions, for learning, for call calibrations, like all of this stuff that you would have done just sort of through osmosis. We're being more thoughtful and more purposeful with our time to make sure that stuff doesn't get lost, because that's what you would worry about, I think, the most.
Yeah, I think,
Are you hearing similar from I'm curious what you've heard from other folks.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of there's probably two aspects of it. There's one aspect, which is particularly for people that are new to selling, or maybe even just new to, professional work. Like, how do you get those habits, and how do you sort of, get quick corrections on the things that you need to do better, is sort of one aspect. And the other aspect that I hear a lot of is sort of, sales is so much of a game of rejection that, sort of being around a bunch of other people that are also being rejected, so that you can sort of have this esprit de corps of like, hey, we're all in it together. And like, hey, Jill just got a big win. Everybody celebrates the win, even though you just got, your teeth kicked in a few times. Like, there's sort of that aspect of it that I think, people are trying to figure out what's the right way to, if everybody's kind of working in their house, how does that work? Like, I may have mentioned this on a different episode, but we actually had one of our reps at Yesware is in a sort of a three flat with, a bunch of other reps from other companies. They have their own little boiler room in the kitchen where they're all making phone calls. So it's sort of like a DIY sort of setup to get some of that. But yeah, I don't think anyone's really sorted this out, because you have some very strong positives and some very strong negatives on both ends. And, as you've said, you have the data that supports that you're actually being productive. And so what do you do in that scenario?
We've got, I don't know if you use Slack or something similar, but we have a Slack Gong channel where any big deal, and because we had, as we used to have a Gong where big orders, you get to bang the Gong. So we've tried to replicate those in-office dynamics. We have another channel that's just more of an engagement channel with some of the contests that we run, and we have salesperson of the month, and those types of things we're trying to engage on. We'll have virtual events periodically, but it's not the same. I think from a team camaraderie perspective, it's not the same, but I don't know that you'd be able to build a huge sales team with the best people if you didn't have a bunch more flexibility these days.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough. I mean, are you thinking about sort of, diversity of additional geographies now that you have this orientation? Or are you still Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have, it's great. And we've been able to, when you saturate a market too, it's really hard to find people. So that issue kind of went away as well. And we have other teams at Wayfair that are remote as well. So there's like, we can also be thinking about career pathing across not just our sales teams, but other teams, and making sure that it feels like I could actually build my career here. We try to bring people together, but it's more manager and like manager and managers of managers will get together a couple times a year. And that's like really energizing for folks.
Yeah.
But I think it will evolve. I think we're learning and we'll get better at it.
Yeah, I suspect it's a solvable problem in the sense that, for a long time, most field sales organizations were remote, right? Unless you had like just an incredibly massive sales organization, you had, a few people here, a few people there, because you had to be, it was better to be close to the customer than close to your coworkers. And somehow with sales organizations, we figured out ways to transfer knowledge and get people together and do kickoffs and have all that sort of stuff. And, I've got to believe now with, many, many years of advancement in tech, like we can figure out how to, get the best of, some of the in-person stuff while allowing people, sort of the benefits of some of that flexibility.
And by the way, we haven't like for Wayfair generally our corporate teams, which there's a lot of functions, there's a lot of partnership cross-functionally. We actually have found that getting people in office is totally important. And so we have people on the corporate side coming in 3 days a week to offices. Tech, again, like a little different. So it's all different by function.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay for companies to distinguish by like how a team operates, what makes sense for them.
Yeah. Yeah. That does seem to be, from what I can tell, one of the things that's kind of emerging is particularly as you get into a large company like Wayfair, it's like really hard to generalize across functions. And so it seems as though, at least to me, the people that are probably the most thoughtful about this are taking a more bespoke approach and saying like, well, the engineer, we have like very senior engineering organization. They probably don't want to come into the office that much. And like, maybe they shouldn't,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the flip side of it now is with, so much remote work. It's like somebody that you maybe thought, you didn't have as much competition for, they could be hired by anybody in the world now, if they're really good at what they do.
Yeah.
So it's
I
definitely
think that's true. It's going to continue to evolve, I think. I don't think it's totally shaken out yet.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, Margaret, we're starting to run out of time here. I'm sure we could talk about this stuff all day, but really fascinating conversation. Again, I just want to congratulate you on a tremendous job well done over there at Wayfair. It's been incredible to watch the process of growing this part of the business. Really, really incredible.
Well, thanks for leaving it in such a good spot, Joel.
Well, that I think you're probably very, very deft at taking a perhaps slightly unstable situation and making it very stable. But no, I couldn't be more happy. And from the folks that I keep in touch with, I know that they've really gotten a lot of a lot of value out of your leadership and have really enjoyed working in the organization over time. So that's great. Now, if folks want to learn more about Wayfair Professional or wanted to be in touch, like what are the best ways to do that?
You can Google Wayfair Professional, and we have an application. So if anybody's shopping for business, you can join the program, and we would love it. Lots of good stuff.
Yeah.
If anybody's looking for luxury furniture, Perigold as well.
Yeah, I can give a big endorsement to both of those to both of those recommendations. So yeah, if you're a business, be in touch. It's a great way to get higher level of service and really get taken care of from the Wayfair side. So take advantage of that. No cost to join.
We do everything from small stuff to really big, big projects as well. So.
Yeah, great. Well, Margaret, thanks again for joining us today on the Hard Sell, and I'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thanks so much. Great to see you, Joel.
Okay, bye.